Hey everybody, this is Gene Marks and welcome back to another episode of Biz Books, where I speak to some super smart authors of some great business books, hopefully to give you some of the flavor of what the book is about and give you some good content as well to learn from. Today, I'm speaking to the authors of Upstream Marketing, Unlock Growth by Using the Principles of Insight, Identity, Innovation. I have Tim Koelzer, I have Kristin Kurth. Both of them are the co-founders of EquiBrand Consulting. So first of all, thank you both for joining me.
Sure.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Yep. Hey, Kristin, ladies first.
All right.
Let me ask a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and how you came to joining up with Tim and writing this book.
Sure. So I have spent my career in both upstream marketing and downstream marketing. I started actually way back when as a media planner on the Procter & Gamble business, and then in advertising, and worked for what was now Havas, BBDO Chicago, and spent several years at Ogilvy, Chicago, where I was a senior partner and ran some global businesses for them, and then switched over to doing some strategy consulting. I kind of took the classic packaged goods background, did some work with a design shop that worked in financial services and got to work on some amazing brands. For the last 20 years, I have been working with Tim. We co-founded EquiBrand Consulting, and basically everything that we've done as a company and just in our careers is really reflected in the book, Upstream Marketing. So Tim, I will say, took the lead and putting pen to paper and kept us going, but it's been a labor of love and we're really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, I got the same take as well. And Tim, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. It seems like this book is like the culmination of like your entire careers of being in the marketing world. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like Chris and I started in the advertising business, worked for a couple of agencies, and then went back to business school, got out, worked for 3 different consulting firms, and each one provided a little bit of perspective that over the years I found very compelling. The first was Accenture, which was kind of the retail distribution practice. I worked there for a while, then moved over to a new product development company, spent a couple of years there. So really got into the innovation piece. Then moved to another company out of Chicago that's really into strategy and insight, a lot of segmentation, targeting, positioning, concept development. And my final firm was out here in the Bay Area, which was a firm that was more brand strategies, that was more identity work. So I found over the years that I was learning enough about different things. And when we started the firm 20 years ago, it was kind of like, let's start with a clean whiteboard and say, what have we learned and what do we find can really help our clients grow? And it came down to insight, a deeper level of customer understanding, identity, which is helping develop and build powerful brands, and then innovation, helping develop a new stream of revenues through new products and services. So each company kind of provided perspective, then it kind of rolled up into upstream marketing, which we think differentiates our firm, because we don't do a lot of the traditional brand strategy. We don't do logos and websites and collateral material. We focus more on the strategy, which we kind of term upstream marketing, which kind of fits what we do.
And Tim, is EquiBrand Consulting, I mean, can you describe for me like your typical client? Is it generally a larger company, enterprise type company, or do you deal with smaller companies as well?
It tends to be the larger clients. We're kind of industry agnostic. We find a lot of industries appreciate kind of that classic training that Kristin talked about. So our background is more in the heritage of consumer products and traditional consumer products and that kind of marketing. But we find many clients that are in financial services, that are in healthcare, that are in pharmaceuticals, finance, insurance. All those companies we work with, they tend to be larger companies. But one of the reasons we wrote Upstream Marketing specifically was to share the knowledge that we know works with those companies to other companies. So we have a website, upstreammarketing.com, which kind of makes it a little bit more specific, I think, to smaller companies that don't want to hire a consulting firm, but still want to tap into the knowledge and the insight. So that's kind of how I would characterize it.
Got it. Kristin, throughout the book, you guys really kind of focus on some of these leading blue chip brand names: Starbucks, Google, Southwest, Amazon, Nike, Apple, Disney. They keep coming back and back again in your book because you guys keep using them as examples of some of the practices that you're promoting and you're recommending. I'm kind of curious how you landed on those companies.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because when you walk into a room, I always do this. I teach. I'm also an adjunct professor, and I'll ask the students, when you think of the biggest and best brands out there, who comes to mind? And those companies that we have studied over time are certainly top of mind
Right.
for a lot, but we want to level deeper. We've, really studied them deeply, have, read a lot about their founders. Tim's actually spent some time at some of them, directly. And they are the companies, and I'll let him elaborate, that are going to be around, 30 years from now, when people are talking about the biggest and best brands. There are a lot of great, exciting brands out there today, but those that have applied the principles of insight, identity, and innovation, and truly build their businesses through the eyes of their customers, and have done so successfully and sustainably, that's why they've ended up on our list. And Tim, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one thing in particular, Gene, that we didn't do, which a book you're probably familiar with, Good to Great. I think it's probably the best business books ever written, and they profile a number of companies. They did a financial analysis, statistical analysis,
Yes.
to define which companies were the best and which were not so good, and how to get there. I don't know what percentage of companies are no longer on that list, but since publishing that book, 20, 30, I don't even know how many years old it is, but a lot of the companies that they profiled as being the best went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so, and that book is still a great book, but you
Yeah.
go through there and you can list 4 or 5 companies that are no longer with us. And
I think of Xerox as one of the ones.
Xerox, yeah, I think one of the other, there's
IBM.
few, yeah, exactly. And so we didn't spend the time saying which are the greatest companies and do the financial analysis, but we knew anecdotally that these are the companies that a lot of people point to as having some of the strongest businesses and brands in the world. So we wanted to understand them. And the other thing we did is we didn't start from now. We went back and said, what was the foundation of Disney like with Walt Disney, with Steve Jobs, with Jeff Bezos. And so it wasn't just taking the point where they are, but what kind of brought them along, and what were the foundational principles that they really espoused and continue to espouse many years after they're gone. So it's really a kind of a profile of a certain number of companies, but then applying our business case, because we do consulting for a lot of firms, and we're saying, that one works, that one really doesn't work. And so it was an application of looking at best practices, but also drawing from our own clients what worked and what didn't, frankly.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that comes across as well is, this is a marketing and a branding book. Good to Great. There was a lot of talk about operational issues, even non-sales. This is more like, right, what your culture, what your brand is, and what your relationship is with your customers.
Exactly.
And I have to also point out, I'm glad you guys focused on those well-known brands, because frankly, if you were talking about lesser known companies, it's not as it doesn't strike the same chord. We deal with Starbucks and Google and Amazon every day, so it just makes sense to go about that approach. All right, so Tim, let me start with you. First of all, the book itself it's broken out into 3 parts. There's a first principle is insight, second principle is identity, third principle is innovation. So let's spend a few minutes on insight. So I'm going to ask you about the deprivation study that you talked about, where backpacks were taken away from kids. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's important for insight.
It was just a novel approach. We were working for one of the big backpack companies. It was Jansport a number of years ago. So this is work that we did a number of years ago. And they had hired consultants before we came in, and they were trying to understand how we improve the backpack. And it was very much a backpack focused mindset. What can we do with the suspension load or the pockets, and then we said, well, let's start even further back and say, what if we were to take the kids' backpack away from their school week? What would that be like? And so we went to the school and filmed, and actually another firm kind of helped us through this, but they filmed an episode where kids didn't have their backpacks, so they're literally carrying their pack, their books down the hall, stopping, and it became very evident that it was more than just the size of the pocket that the backpack meant to them. It meant organization. There was a social component, because at that time many kids would put like stickers and emblems on the back of their backpack. So it was a much more experiential perspective, and that was the deprivation study. That we deprived the kids of their backpack for about a week, filmed it, And the client said that was very instrumental in identifying new insights that they wouldn't have normally received had they just focused on the backpack itself. We were trying to provide a larger perspective, and that information was very compelling in helping new product development and also messaging and positioning.
Makes sense. Kristin, I'm going to turn to you. We're still on the on the insight principle, and you guys spend some time about proprietary insights. And I was wondering if you can comment on, what a proprietary insight is and just some of the tips that you laid out on obtaining proprietary insight. There's a bunch of them, and I can read some of them out to you if you forget just off the top of your head. But tell us about
No, proprietary insight, we think, is what leads to competitive advantage. And one of the questions that we ask our customers consistently is, what do you know about your most important customers that your competitors don't know? And we think within that, uncovering those insights is really what leads to competitive advantage. So how do you get them? There are lots of ways that we've conducted research, and we're very big on having a balanced approach to research. So qualitative research like the deprivation study, or ethnographic research, where in the small kitchen category, spending time with people using the actual appliances and what the role of that product and all that it represents, what that role is in the life of a customer. And that's really where the nuggets of insight for new product development, for deepening the relationship with that customer, as we call it, the brand. Those are the types of insights that are, going to be very different than what you would get if you sent out surveys, and, which are also very helpful, and they can be proprietary. But we're really into balancing qualitative with quantitative and trying to get at those insights that our competitors don't have.
Got it. And you talk about like 3 types of benefits. There's anti-benefits, driver benefits, reassurance benefits. Can you expand on what those benefits are?
Sure. Let me give you an example from the auto category. We've done some work in automotive. And many, many years ago, when, Honda was building its brand, it represented something that stood out in the automotive category. And those benefits that it brought to the world were durability, quality, and reliability. And at the time, those were differentiating benefits. Over the years, as competitors have upgraded and up-leveled, the technology in automotive and that whole industry, categories change. But if you don't have what we call DQR, durability, quality, reliability, you're never going to compete in automotive. So those 3 things that were differentiating benefits years ago are now really the price to play. We call those anti-benefits. If you don't have them, you probably won't compete. Those benefits ladder up to more rational. They're still rational benefits, but they get at, what is really driving your interest in all of that. So at the lowest level of our benefit hierarchy are functional attributes of a car. There's an engine, and there are, design elements, there are services, et cetera. But when you ask a customer, so what does that do for you? The first thing they'll say is, well, it gives me a way to get from point A to point B. It gives me all, the ride. Those are rational benefits. What are the things that it does for the customer? Rational benefits ladder up to emotional benefits. So if, you're asking the question, okay, you keep probing, well, what does that do for you? Well, what does that do for you? You ultimately get to the point, what does that say about you? And those are the more emotional benefits, like in the automotive category. If you drive a luxury vehicle that says you've arrived or you're successful, or, in certain categories, we work with cars where people feel smart because they've achieved the ability to purchase a luxury auto. So that's really what we mean from, functional lower level attributes that ladder up to rational and then emotional. And Tim, you can,
Yeah, the only thing I would say is anti-driver reassurance, antis are table stakes. Like Kristin said, you have to have them to be even in the consideration set.
Right.
frankly, we work with certain clients that haven't even addressed the antes. So it's hard to get to a driver benefit, which is what drives decision, what distinguishes or one company from the other, one brand from the other. So ante, driver, and the highest orders, as Chris was saying, is reassurance. It's something that's kind of often at times on the margin of the company's been around for 100 years, or they have a warranty or a trust factor. So it's important not to think just about one benefit, but how do they work together as a portfolio? And you have to have all three, because if you're just focused on the antes, you're going to be a commodity. Anybody can do that. So you need to also include differentiation, which is a driver benefit. Then the reassurance is more the halo, where a lot of the emotional connection that Kristin was talking about really comes into play.
And do you have to construct this benefit hierarchy, on a product by product basis, if you're, or can you do this, as a firm, in its entirety?
You can do it both ways. You can do it. Sometimes we work at corporate level marketing, like what does the corporation stand for? What's the positioning of the corporation? Other times we're at a very specific level of different, a product within the corporation. So a lot of these principles hold. So whether you're dealing at the corporate level or a very product level, or a large corporation or a small corporation, we find that the frameworks and the tools really hold. So relevance, differentiation, credibility is one framework that you probably saw in the book.
Yep.
Anti-driver reassurance is another framework that we used in the book. And so we apply these tools and frameworks that we know to be proven across industries, products, different levels, and you can get a lot of insight that way.
Talking about frameworks, Tim, I'll stay on you. You actually highlighted 3 growth strategy frameworks. Can you talk a little bit about them? There's like the 2x2 matrix and the conventional market. Just talk a little bit about what you mean by growth strategy framework.
Yeah. So the first one a lot of people think about is 2x2 matrix. Is it a product, existing product, or a new product? And is it focused on a new customer or an existing customer? Right. And so if you think about, if I can, it's a 2x2 matrix. I'm talking about products and customers. And that's the basic level of marketing. It's like, do I expand and grow by attracting new customers, or do I expand and grow by developing new products? So it's kind of a very important tool, but it's limited because you're thinking about new versus existing and products and customers, very straightforward. The next level is what a lot of companies use, which is more of a segmentation. And there are a variety of ways to segment the marketplace. And one is based on demographics, women 18 to 54, or men 50 plus, or right, male versus female, or college educated or not. So that's kind of the second level, which is traditional segmentation. And you can also expand that to geographic segmentation, behavioral segmentation, attitudinal segmentation. That's the second level. The third level is really when you combine different influences. So you're combining this traditional segmentation, but with a deeper level of insight. And so you're really looking to apply that to the organization in a way that traditional segmentation will not. So that does require proprietary insight. Because if I were to say, I'm going to segment my consumers, adults 18 to 54, that are certain socioeconomic income, anybody has that information. But if I can own my segmentation, and if I can develop a customer framework that's proprietary to our organization, we know it's true in the marketplace, that provides us with a leg up, and that provides competitive differentiation.
Are these, growth strategy, these frameworks, are they independent of each other, or can you be using more than one at a time?
Yeah, you can use more than one at a time. We kind of go through, first, second, and third. There's a cost and expense in getting deeper insight. So there could be a lot of value just in saying, as a company, and maybe there's a small business owner listening in. My brother is a small business retailer, and it's like he's in the pharmacy industry. It's like, all right, I can either add new products to my set, or try to gain new customers, new products. Historical pharmaceutical, where they sell retail products and pharmaceutical products, and they said, well, our new product offering is going to be home health, because we know there's a trend there. So that's an example where it's still the same customer, but they're providing new products. Conversely, they could say, we're not going to go into home health, but we're going to go into free delivery. Same basic product, but I'm adding another service. So it's useful to think about the product market construct as the first level, because that can provide a lot of insight. But then, deeper insight comes with deeper understanding. And so we expand that out into different factors and attitudes and motivations and behaviors is where the real insight comes.
Kristin, we'll move off of insights just a minute, but I'd love you to just share with our audience just what is meant by a targeting paradox. And you guys give examples about Nike and Apple that went through this. I thought it was pretty interesting, and I was hoping that you could expand on it.
And it's really fascinating when we see this in action. So the basic premise of the targeting paradox is that the more focused you are on a segment of customers, the more successful you'll likely be.
Okay.
So picture the bullseye. Here's the problem. Every organization they don't want to leave anything on the table. It's always like, who do you target? And they say, well, we do these and we do those, and we focus here, and everybody's trying to be all things to all people. True. Well, in doing that, you can really dilute your brand, and you can dilute your efforts. So what Nike does well is at the center of their bullseye, or Gatorade for that matter, is a performance athlete. Very, very specific. Everything they do, from product development to marketing to, everything, advertising, whatever it might be, promotion, it's really focused on the performance athlete. Now, we both know millions and millions of consumers don't fit that profile, but they are what we call the consumption market. The marketing target is the center. The consumption market is what, who does that proposition appeal to?
Right.
So in really focusing on a narrower target, you end up being more to more people. So it's just that recognition of focus helping.
I was going to give the example of this book, actually. I mean, your book itself is clearly a marketing book targeted at marketing professionals. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. And that's sort of your strategic market. But the paradox there is that there's this wider audience of people out there that want to learn more about marketing, and they can be business owners or managers, or they're not necessarily marketing professionals, but they know that these concepts are important. So like Nike, they're good, they're trying to be these high performance athletes, but we all consider ourselves to be the high performance athletes to some extent, so their products appeal to it all, just like your book could appeal to a wider audience than just that sort of target that you're going after. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact,
Gene, good work. You actually did read this book.
Yeah, you read it for sure.
But you totally got it. I don't even think I'd thought of that.
No, I did because it's really important, because that's exactly, I didn't make that connection, Gene. Thank you for doing that. But sure. When we wrote the book, we kind of said, we want this to be like Good to Great, but for marketing.
Right.
That was kind of, we wanted to bring in case examples. We wanted to tell a little bit of story. We wanted to bring through some themes that people could kind of hang their hat on, knowing it would never be as great as Good to Great, but knowing there was a framework that they used. So there's even the number of chapters, and we tried to model this after that, knowing that it had broader application than just marketing, just as Good to Great does. Right. It's probably the #1 business book, and it's read by people in many different fields, and just organization and strategy and not-for-profits, and people just interested in other companies. So that's why we try to weave together the stories that would have broader application than just marketing people. But you're absolutely right. Our center of our bullseye was, the senior vice president of marketing that has been doing this for a number of years. So our target, frankly, was people that know marketing but want to know it better. But we hope it pulls from a broader set of customers, because we think there's broad application.
Yeah, it's it's funny. I was just listening to a podcast. It was Lex Friedman was interviewing Magnus Carlsen about who's the world's greatest chess player. And I'm not even that big fan of chess. I mean, it's a fun game, but I listened to the interview mainly because I wanted to learn more about him, and I also wanted to learn more about chess, even though I'm nowhere near that level in the chess world. So again, there is that apply. Tim, before we move on then to the second principle, we've been talking about the first principle, which is insight, and there's a lot to unpack here. So just for the reader, for your readers that are walking away from that first section, what are you kind of hoping that they're the overall takeaway from that first principle of insight that you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, I mean, it's overstated, but just get close to your customer, live and breathe, and understand them. We get hired. So many companies start with a very deep understanding of who their customers, and then over time they lose focus. They work in the business versus on the business. So they have to hire firms like us, but they don't really. There's insight in there for many. If you're an owner of a retail store, or somebody in the hotel industry.
Mhm.
There's a lot of insight that anybody can get through, TripAdvisor, or just talking to their customers, leaving a little note at the end of their stay and fill this out. So these are little things, but it's really a sign of how customer sensitive are we. And it's all about being customer. And, Amazon wants to be known as the most customer driven company in the world. And I think they've been successful in large part because of that. And so, it's really that customer sensitivity, immersing yourself in their experience, because that's where really the foundation is for for identity and innovation, which are the other two chapters of the book.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so that makes complete sense to me. So our first principle, insights, that's where we're looking at the customers, which then Kristin now brings us into the second principle, which to me, it seems now this is all about us as an organization, identity. And, I'm hoping I got that right. And I'd love you to pick up from where Tim sort of left off, Kristin, and say, okay, as we go into the second principle, which is identity, before I even start that section of the book, what would you expect me to hopefully learn from that section when I'm finished it?
Well, actually, we are talking about identity from a strategic upstream perspective.
Okay.
So when I say brand identity, most people think about the look and feel and the logo and the voice of a brand, but we're talking about the strategic foundation of a brand.
Okay.
How is it positioned? What we want people to understand is, before you start downstream spending a lot of dollars on implementation of strategies like, paying designers, digital marketing expenses, filming things, social media, all of these downstream expenses can be a lot of wasted resources there if you don't have an identity foundation for the brand that's based on the brand's strategy. So that is one, positioning. What do we want to stand for in the minds of our customers? What's our customer value proposition?
Right.
How do we uniquely address, with the benefits of our product or service or offering, address the needs of our customers, and what operational mandates, what are the assets, the capabilities that have to align with that? So these are more foundational, but at the end of the day, I like to define a brand. The best definition of a brand to me was a brand, it can be a relationship that a customer has with a product or service offering. Sure. Very generally. And I really like that definition because, and when you think about how, marketing has evolved, today we all talk about customer experiences. Identity is kind of the internal work of, who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What do I stand for? And what do I want? What kind of relationship do I want with my customers? So that's just kind of I want people to understand that there's a strategic identity in addition to the more common, brand identity, logo, look and feel.
Understood. So I'm going to stay with you, Kristin, on that, because you mentioned value propositions, and you guys given your book some great examples. I can think of no better company, at least this is my personal opinion, that gives that value proposition than Starbucks. And I was, I was hoping Kristin can explain to us like why, what you say Starbucks' value proposition is, and how they go about getting that message out.
Okay, I'll get you started on the value proposition. Imagine 3 columns for those who don't have the book. The first column is the customer's needs. So what are your customers really asking for? And for Starbucks, the first one is, I just need great coffee to start my day. Okay. That's what they want. They want a product offering like Starbucks offers. And then the middle column is, what unique benefits do we deliver as Starbucks to meet that customer need? And so for Starbucks, it's the work they do at selecting beans and putting together, what is their offering of coffee, the unique Starbucks coffee. And then the last column are the operations that, how do they go about doing this? How do they actually deliver on that promise of good coffee? Is, the growers that they have relationships with, it's very product focused, their first plank. Sure. But aligning those 3 things are what the customer value proposition is. But Starbucks, and you can debate whether or not their coffee is great, good, whatever. Everybody will argue with you what's the right answer. But what they've gone to market doing is building it out that Starbucks is so much more than a cup of coffee in the morning. They've created an experiential brand. And Tim, you might want to talk through the more important planks.
Yeah, well,
the value planks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, value planks.
The first is product. The second is the service experience. So when you how the barista meets you or greets you, they're supposed to know you if they know your name, they use your name, remember your order, provide that personal experience. Even though there are 30,000 stores or more across the globe, they want to provide a personal experience. So the service is very much defined to align with that. The third plank down is all about the ambience. Every Starbucks store is designed to be slightly different to reflect the neighborhood. So you won't find a lot of cookie cutter stores. I mean, they'll have certain components, but they're designed to have a personal experience. That was the third plank. And then the fourth was something I think they rolled out, 8 or 10 years ago. The strategy was make it a third place. Between home and office. Starbucks' strategy at the time, this is pre-COVID, was to come enjoy a cup of coffee, free Wi-Fi, comfortable seats, spend some time, which results in greater revenue for them in the afternoon. So that was the fourth plank. And the fifth plank was social inclusion, which is really directed at the employees themselves. Starbucks knew that to create a strong brand, they had to start with the customers. And so social inclusion, how they offer their employees, free college tuition assistance, a number of other things that were revolutionary at the time to try to attract the customer or their employees, because they realized how important that value plank is to the Starbucks experience. So it really is about an experience more than just the coffee, and I think that's why they've been successful.
Do you think, Tim, that Starbucks actually had this in mind from the very beginning? Do you think that they had these planks or something, similar to them?
I think they had the three, like the coffee, service experience, and the ambience. Those are kind of the three. And then if you read, and we profiled each of these companies.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time, and they did say, hey, we're going to make a specific strategy decision to offer this third space, this third place. And that was driven based on the customer needs, but also, they need to fill the store in the afternoon. And what better way to give, coffee and Wi-Fi and a place for people to meet? Because remember, years ago, it was like everybody would pay for Wi-Fi. That was a way to add revenue. So Starbucks said, well, we could do that, or we could invite people to stay throughout the day. And ultimately, it was more profitable for them, which is why they introduced other certain products that are more important during different day parts as well. So all the teas and all the cold iced drinks, that's all driven by consumer needs, but also aligns with the strategy. So it goes back to what Kristin was saying. It's what's the need, what's the benefit, and then how do we align our operations against that?
Kristin, I'm gonna finish on this one principle with you. At the very end of the section, you guys go into quite a lot of detail about brand management and the 4 keys of brand management. And you guys both write a lot about Apple and how it built its sort of brand architecture. And you point out that it uses clarity and synergy and leverage it. Can you expand a little bit on what what is meant by brand architecture and why it's important to brand manager and to brand management and what was so special about what Apple did?
Yeah. So brand, we do a lot of work in brand architecture. And I will say even more recently, there seems to be really high demand in the marketplace for brand architecture. And the reason for that is, think about businesses that have been around for 100 years. They've acquired brands and businesses over the years. They've tucked them under whatever, the master primary brand. And they, go on and do business and they launch products, and everybody has to name a product. And if you're in a division of a, big pharmaceutical company and you have, a lot of products, well, you're going to naturally want to name them if you're a marketing person in that, organization. Well, what ends up happening is a proliferation, too many brands, too many names, where the entire structure, if you're a customer-driven organization, is very confusing to an end customer. So architecture is really focusing on one primary brand and aligning the portfolio of products and services that you offer to, really limit the number of brands, and the way, or make it clear to the customer, these are the products we offer under these names. You know, make it possible that if you sell, for instance, an Apple product that's, you know, a computer laptop, and somebody, you know, sees Apple as, you know, the earpods, whatever, that there's synergy across the portfolio.
Right.
And that you can, you know, cross sell because of the strength in the master brand or the primary brand, and then you can sell across. So there's synergy, or clarity, synergy, and then how do you leverage that brand in ways that can help you grow by offering new products and services under that one brand, as opposed to having names and, you know, offerings all over. This is the way to structure the portfolio of offerings so the customer sees it through a simpler lens, you know, than the organization behind it with, you know, a lot of products and services. It's for more efficiency. You know, companies save a lot of money by this brand architecture work. They also have better relationships with customers because they are really making it clear. Apple is a great example. Everything, it's such a clear architecture that started way back when with the you know, the look of the Apple, but also the first computer that they launched.
Right.
And how now everything has flown and everything is named in a very strategic, organized structure that you always know, and even the way that they've built it downstream, everything looks and feels very Apple-esque. So that's really, those are the goals of brand architecture. And Tim, you can probably add to this about some of the work we've done here.
No, I think you're right. It's you know, how do you structure your brands so there's clarity, synergy, and leverage? And
Sure.
if you like the Coca-Cola company, that's the name of the company, but they've got Coke, Diet Coke, Sprite, Diet Coke, caffeine free. So it's really how you think about how do we structure our portfolio so there's meaning in the organization.
You know who's done like a terrible job at that, and this is my opinion, so you guys don't have to agree or disagree, but you know, Microsoft, I think, is almost the opposite of that. You know, it's a mishmash of products with different designs, different logos, different names to them. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. A lot of that is internally driven, either through acquisitions, like Kristin mentioned, they
Yeah.
acquire a company, they haven't ingrained it, or they've got a brand manager at some level in the organization says, I need a new brand to create excitement and news. And that's true at that one case. But when you look across 50 products, you know, wait, we have a mess on our hands. And so there's reason to do it, but it really requires that discipline and the top down, because these are tough decisions. Brands are very personal. People spend their lives creating and investing and building a brand. And if the company gets acquired and they say, well, you know what, your brand's going to go away, that's a hard decision. So it really has to be embedded in the organization. We're going to focus on a primary brand, and the notion of we put more wood behind one arrow. You know, we want to focus on IBM or
Sure.
Apple. We want to focus on Amazon. And so companies are learning that it's better to have a strategy and a structure up front as opposed to find yourselves a number of years with a mess on your hands.
So we've talked about insights, which is gaining knowledge about your customers and the products that you sell, you know, and how they're perceived, how they're used. We've then, you know, talked about our own identities, you know, building a value proposition, designing and aligning those value propositions, having value planks, managing our brand. All of that takes a lot of work. I get that, but hopefully, if we're moving along in that direction, we can really start innovating, you know, and that's your third principle, is innovation. Because once companies can get to a certain level, they can really create and put forth really great products and services that can align with their brands and with what their customers want. So I'm going to give each of you guys a chance. I'm going to pick Disney. I'm going to pick Google. And so Tim, I'll pick on you first, and I'll pick Google, if that's okay. You write about how Google innovates, and Kristin, I'm coming from you next because I want to hear from you how Disney innovates. But let's talk about Google. Just tell us the story of why they're so innovative and what they've done to innovate.
I think there are a couple of specific things. Number one, they also are very much customer driven. So, you know, they use the data that they gain from us to continually refine and maximize and operate and innovate. So a lot of theirs is pretty straightforward. They've got the data right there. They say, hey, I know my customers behaving this way. They're using AI now. We haven't thought of, but we're relying on the data to tell us where to go. So it's a different thing. It's not a focus group per se, but they're very much data driven. The other thing they did culturally is they walked away from this, but when they started in the earlier years, they gave a certain percentage of the time for their engineers to spend time doing anything that they wanted to do that they felt was going to help the company grow. So they gave them the time and the cultural reinforcement to say, spend time solving customers' problems. So even if you have this is your day job, we're going to carve out a certain amount of time. I don't know what percentage it was. I think it was 20% of the time that you can focus on other areas. And so they did that. The other thing they did organizationally is they decided over the time to kind of provide some different layers. So they have like more think tank type businesses or day-to-day, but they did a very nice job structuring their business. But I guess at the end of the day, they have a cash cow, which is search.
Sure.
And they had a mindset of, segmentation, targeting, positioning, concept development. Where better can we apply those dollars? And that's why they've grown so well, is they had this cash cow that allowed them to move into so many areas. And now they're the leaders in many businesses.
Sure. And they also have a unique approach towards their portfolio, their pipeline. They have that 70-20-10 model.
That's exactly right.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, 70% of their time was focused on the current business. How do we improve that? 20% was more kind of that next level out, things that are in the foreseeable future. And then 10% of their time was like breakthrough stuff, which now, allows them to lead the industry in, auto driving and some of the healthcare stuff, things that were just a glimmer of an idea 10 years ago are now reality. And that's because they're always focused and always kind of spending time thinking about that 10%, like where are we going to be in 5 years or 10 years? That allows us to still focus on the main business, but apply the amount of resource so we're always looking forward.
Makes sense. All right, Kristin, your turn. Let's talk about Disney.
Sure.
How has Disney been innovating?
So Disney as an organization, just in terms of the portfolio, I think we actually say this in the book. Just remember, it all started with a mouse. And Walt Disney's vision and what was created from that, animated mouse that's turned into an empire of entertainment. Everything that they touch, from film to books to cartoons to, all of these different brands, imagine that architecture is pretty complex. But let's talk about the Disney brand itself, like the Walt Disney World and the theme park piece of it. One thing that's really interesting about them, and they really subscribe to using customer insight. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I was at Disney World recently, and there are people all over that park doing research at all times. And we had read through some things in terms of how they get proprietary insights. We read somewhere that, there's a little camera sometimes in Mickey's ear or eye that is actually filming customer reactions to certain things. They have cameras all over the place. I remember being quizzed by somebody on an iPad about my experience. They have data and research and all that really fuels how they improve, how they add. And another thing that they also subscribe to very clearly is segmentation.
Yep.
The principle of segmentation. When there are families, that they cater to. There are singles that they cater to. There are retirees and 55 plus, which gets into when you go to Walt Disney World, it's beyond just theme parks. There are spas now. There are golf courses. There are multiple theme parks for multiple needs. So they really have segmented the market. And when they go to invent something new, I doubt that it's a lot of people sitting around rooms saying we need a new cool, roller coaster. It's about where do we have a gap in our portfolio, either from a customer standpoint or a product alignment standpoint, what's missing, and how do we uniquely fill those gaps in a way that will help us grow and expand.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So I know we're kind of running out of time here, guys. I'm just gonna turn it back to give each of you guys a chance to just say your piece as to what you hope your readers will get out of reading the entire book now that we've discussed those 3 principles. And so, Tim, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you hope I'll walk away with? I know I walked away with a lot of really great knowledge, but what do you hope?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think, there's different levels of the book. There are three key principles: insight, identity, and innovation. We kind of went through that. And within each book, there's a chapter that kind of goes a little, or two chapters that go deeper on that. And so it's kind of the peel the onion approach. If you are interested in just reading the first chapter, I think you'll get a lot out of it, because it is based on our own experience, what works, what doesn't, as well as some deep best practices into best profile companies. Just really the focus on insight, identity, and innovation is critical. And then if you want to learn more, there's a chapter on each component. It ends with kind of an integrated upstream marketing process that anybody can apply to their organization. You can do it. We do that with our clients, but the principles are the same. And then it also ends with a list of 20 questions to ask your organization to determine whether or not and how upstream marketing might help your organization. And that's the final chapter that kind of brings everything together.
Kristin, can you add anything to that?
Barely. No, not really. I just think that I really appreciate the time for us to talk about it. It just kind of gets me excited about what's in there and what we can offer, not just the big, Fortune 500-esque companies. I do a lot of work with startups.
Yep.
I do a lot of work with students of marketing who are very passionate about going into marketing, and do work with small to medium-sized businesses. And sometimes I think my happy, outcome of this would be that somebody who is in B2B marketing gets something out of this, that the principles do apply, as Tim said many times, across industries, across B2B versus B2C, whether you're a small startup to a Fortune 100. So I hope everybody finds something in there that's an aha, or this could really help me grow.
I have to tell you guys both, this is honestly, I read a lot of books. There are a lot of bullshit books out there about marketing. This one is legit. It's academic. It's very detailed. It really lays down a strategy and a mindset for anyone that's building a business, whether or not you're a marketing expert or not, or plan to spend your career in marketing. It really is about defining who your customers are and what you want your company to be, and the way to think when it comes to innovating. So I think it's a great book. It deserves to be studied more. And I think it really is on a level above the typical marketing book that you see out there. And I know you guys don't have to diss your competitors. I will. But it definitely stands above. So I want to wish you guys both the best of luck with the book. The book is called Upstream Marketing: Unlock Growth by Using the Principles of Insight, Identity, Innovation. Tim Koelzer, Kristin Kurth, co-founders of EquiBrand Consulting. Guys, Kristin, what's EquiBrand's website?
Oh, it's EquiBrand, EquiBrand consulting.com.
Perfect. Guys, thank you both very, very much. It was a great conversation. And again, best of luck.